Reviewers are not heroes. They are a threat to society. Let's talk about Daredevil, Born Again.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we're going to be discussing or debating Daredevil Born Again. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is. It's time to give you guys movie recommendations. Daniel, you want me to go first or do you want to go first?
I can go first if you like. I watched Misery, which is a 1980 psychological thriller movie based on a Stephen King story. It's a classic. I've been meaning to watch it for a long time, and this weekend I got around to watching it. It's essentially the story about an author who has finished his latest novel while living in a cottage in a remote area somewhere. And as he drives back to town to submit his manuscript, he gets caught in a snowstorm. He gets rescued by somebody who turns out to be a stalker fan, like an absolutely fanatic, obsessed fan who finds out that he is her favorite author and that he's basically like captive to her because he's got his legs broken and like they're snowed in and stuff like that. And she basically tells him that she will call the hospital, once the roads are open again, but this might be weeks. And it then turns out that she's an absolute fan of his novel series that has just ended. And she is furious with the fact that he killed her favorite character. And she makes him write a new novel while recovering to kind of bring that character back and give that character a happy ending. And it's very intense. It's kind of basic. It's mostly two people in a room. It's a very intense performance from Kathy Bates as the fan, who is very nice 1 minute, and then the wrong thing can just set her off, and she becomes a complete psycho. And it's very much like an author kind of sticking it to his worst fans, right? There's some great symbolism in there. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but there's a couple of scenes in there where I say, oh yeah, this is like he's venting some stuff, right? He's had run-ins with fans who are less than reasonable, and this is his way of telling them where to shove it. So it's very. It runs pretty much entirely on the performance of these two actors, and the thing just progresses very slowly and deliberately towards this confrontation where he basically has to string. It's almost like 1001 Nights, where he basically has to keep her interested long enough to formulate an escape plan, but that only works for so long because eventually he has to finish the novel, and then what then, right? That kind of thing, right? So it's basically this mind game between the author and the superfan. Because he's injured, he's at her mercy, but also he's kind of able to manipulate her by playing with her emotions and expectations and so on, right? So it's great. It's a great story, and it's just thrilling all the way through.
I saw movie posters. I think I saw like half of a trailer to this like time ago or like different periods in time, and I don't know why I never. I don't think there was enough in the trailer that made me want to go watch it. But obviously, after hearing your description of it, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give it a shot because I'm gonna give it a shot. Um,
Yeah, Stephen King is 50-50 for me. Some of his stuff I quite like, a lot of it I don't like.
mm,
And so just I dislike a lot of his tropes and a lot of his stock characters and stuff like that. And I think this is almost like Stephen King for people who don't like Stephen King, because he doesn't do most of the things you probably dislike about him. At least that was kind of my experience. But yeah, but it just stands really good, really well on its own.
well, me, I didn't really watch much this weekend, but I did manage to get into the new episode of Power Book 3, Raising Kanan. I think we're in season 3 or season 4, one of them. This is pretty much based on Kanan's character, which is a character in pretty much the whole Power universe. Daniel, I think you said you've seen a couple of episodes of Power.
I
Uh,
might have, but
yeah,
I don't.
but I don't think, yeah, I don't know if you got into it, but it was Power and Ghost. But yeah, this series is based on Kanan's story and pretty much how his rise to in the drug game pretty much comes about. And yeah, it's filled with family feuds, filled with shocking moments, filled with a lot of gangster stuff, man. It's the typical hood, American hood type of drama. I think it's in terms of like all the Power books I've seen, because there's Power Book One. Obviously, there's Power, there's Power Book Force, which is Tommy's story. there's Power Book. I don't know the numbers of it, but there's the Power Book with Tariq's story, and then there's Kanan's story. So yeah, the Kanan one out of all four, I'd say this one's probably third best. I'd say first is Power, then it's Tariq's Power Book, and then it's Kanan's one. Yeah, so Kanan's one is juicy, man. It's juicy and it's an engaging watch. It's an engaging watch. Because I think there's a lot of unexpected moments, a lot of snaky business going on, and it's always going to be like that. The ending where it's like a shell shock type of moment. So yeah, expect that. So I'd recommend that for you guys in case you haven't seen it. But all right then, the main event, Daredevil Born Again. Daniel, can you please let the people know what Daredevil Born Again is about?
So we're recording this after the first two episodes are out. So this is episodes 1 and 2 of season 1 of Daredevil Born Again. So this is a continuation of the 2014, I think, Netflix Daredevil series, folded into the main MCU now. And it follows Matt Murdock as Daredevil, who has been not a vigilante for a number of years as the story starts. He's a successful lawyer who is financially successful and uses a lot of those resources to kind of help people who normally wouldn't be able to afford lawyers like him. And the story essentially starts with his friend Foggy being killed by an assassin who then goes on trial. And in addition to that, the Kingpin comes out of exile following the events of the last series of Daredevil, and he's apparently a reformed man. He runs for mayor and wins at the end of the first episode. He essentially runs on an anti-vigilante platform. So he promises to clean up New York City and get rid of people like Daredevil, but also other masked vigilantes that are apparently running around in New York. And that is kind of as far as episode 2 goes. And we have not seen the rest of the season so far because it's not out yet. But this is basically about our impressions and where we expect the story to go. So what were your impressions for Daredevil Born Again?
Well, I'm pretty much going into this not knowing the backstory because I haven't seen the Netflix version of not Netflix version, but I haven't seen Netflix Daredevil series. So watching it from face value, it was so look, I've always liked street level heroes in the whole superhero genre. This one so far in the 2 episodes, I'm not too convinced. It's cool though. I definitely say I'm so far I'm getting like a cool vibe. I do like how they kind of mix. There's quite a few things going on, but I kind of like how they kind of like mix the legal drama with the superhero action. You know what I'm saying? I think that's definitely something which is I think it's for me that's the selling point. It's got like a very odd style. I'm not really like especially like in the first scene. I'm not gonna obviously I'm not gonna say spoiler too quickly, but like in the first scene, the way that was shot, mainly in the fight scene, but like that scene there was a bit weird. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, this feels a bit too theatrical, but at the same time, it's realer than most in terms of the superhero genre. So I think the style was a bit. It reminded me of what was that network TV network? It was called CW. Yeah, it reminds me of those type of shows. And with those type of shows, it's give or take with them. And I think a lot of those shows I wasn't really a fan of them. There was some which were hidden gems. So this one does kind of give that type of the way that it's shot and the style and like the way that they're not specific. I think the performances were solid in terms of like dialogue scenes, they were solid. But in terms of like just the way that like I said, the cinematography and the style of it, it's CW style. So I'm still gonna obviously give it a chance and hopefully it does end up progressing more. In terms of the story itself, it's cool. Like I said, I'm not too sure with obviously, the significance of each character. Overall, I'd say so far it's a cool little experience, but I'm not too convinced yet.
Yeah, so unlike you, I've seen all of the original Netflix Marvel stuff all the way up to Defenders. I think it's a very mixed bag, but Daredevil was always the highlight of those. But I like street level superheroes. I like gritty, mature, dark stuff. I like things that are a little bit lighter on the melodrama and a bit heavier on like actual plot, things like that. So Daredevil back in the day was a revelation, but that was 2014, 15. I'd have to look up when exactly it came out. So watching this in 2025, this feels very tired, obligatory, rote, and obvious. And I hope this changes. But right now, it feels like we kind of made a checklist of what people liked 10 years ago about Daredevil, or this version of Daredevil. And we're short on characters that people like, that we haven't killed off yet in the movies. So we're gonna dust off Daredevil and make him do Daredevil things. And hopefully people will like it. It also does not seem to really fit into the MCU as it exists in 2025. And we're gonna get into that. That's kind of my main point of criticism. Having said that, I think it's quite well written, well performed. I like the Kingpin. I like Matt Murdock. I like the dynamic between them. They seem to have a plan, right? So the story seems to be very centered on this idea of there are vigilantes in New York, and it's a lot about whether people can change and whether they can move on, and whether or not they are who they say they are, that sort of thing. That seems to be really kind of the underpinning theme of this. And there are good places to take this, and I hope they do. But right now it seems a little bit like it feels a bit like one of those revival shows where like the cast of a sitcom comes together after 20 years and everybody's aged and is tired and everything is slower and everything is just trying to recreate the greatest hits from 20 years ago. And so far that's how it feels. And I hope that's just how it starts, and I hope this becomes its own thing throughout the season, but we'll have to see. So it's kind of my main takeaway from this. Let's talk about it.
And I do kind of like going off what you're saying. I do kind of seen it become messy, which I do like where it's going. I feel like I'll like where it's going because obviously the one of like the themes that they're kind of covering is police brutality, vigilantism, and justice. So, and the way that it seems like it's being set up, especially with the characters, especially like Matt, Flick, Flick's wife, ex-wife or wife, and obviously Matt's love interest. It seems like it's gonna kind of like cover, well, not the police brutality part, but it'll definitely cover like, vigilantism and kind of like justice as well in a very messy way. So I do see fragments of what could potentially happen, which I do like. But question, because kind of going off what you're saying as well about you say it kind of does feel like there's no progression, kind of does feel like the same. So I was gonna ask, like, did it maintain like the gritty, grounded feel of the original Netflix show, or did it kind of shift towards a more typical MCU style
I
for
think
you?
they are imitating or are sticking with. Like, if you're charitable, you can say they have maintained the style. If you're uncharitable, you can say they're just stuck on what they did 10 years ago. I think like it very clearly tries very hard to be that proper Daredevil, right? Because the thing that people really liked about that show back in the day was it's street level, it's gritty. We see Matt get hurt. He's not an action hero in that sense, right? He doesn't just shrug off knife wounds or whatever, right? There's always a cost to the violence, right? And they're trying very hard to do this, and we get like one of those. It's almost as if to prove a point, we get a fight in the first 15 minutes where it's like a mini hallway fight where he and the assassin go across like two different levels, and then they end up on the roof. And it's a lot like the hallway fight from Daredevil season 1, where people get tired and they catch their breath and then they have second winds, and it's all very brutal and visceral and so on. And I kind of feel weird complaining about this because that's what it should be, and if it was anything else, we would be complaining about that. But it just feels like a checklist. It feels like this is what it is supposed to be, so that's what we're gonna do. It doesn't necessarily feel like a progression, like this character has moved on in the last 10 years, has evolved. And it's also the case that he has not been a vigilante for much of those years. But so I'm a little bit on the fence about that. But they are very clearly trying to recreate the feel and tone of the original because that's what worked.
Even though I had a bit of an issue with the way that the fight choreography was done in terms of like, them catching their breath, because that did kind of look too theatrical to me. However,
But it's meant to be realistic, right?
no, but
Like a real fight is over quickly. People don't go for 10 minutes just throwing punches, right? You get exhausted very quickly. Like relatively minor injuries can take you out of the fight. All
yeah,
of that is realistic, right?
it is realistic. However, I'm saying it could have been done in a less exaggerated way. That was my issue with it. However, you are right. Like I said, even though it did feel a bit theatrical to me, it's realer than most, as in most of what we see in the superhero and this
Like
whole superhero
I,
genre.
I've been complaining about fight choreography in the MCU, where it's just actors do this, and then somebody puts in the energy blasts in post, right? Like that's the worst. And this is
Yeah,
proper fighting. Like it's not as good as it was 10 years ago. And that character had some fight scenes, and like that character has been making appearances in a bunch of things. And like there was this infamous. I did not watch Echo, but there was this leaked fight scene that where Disney was. This was supposed to be their prestige. See, like look how much we've still got it, and it was embarrassing. Like it looked like somebody just filmed the rehearsal. Like that's how bad it was. And this is not that bad, but it also was not quite as good as it was like 10 years ago.
I think because you did make this point last time we spoke in the office. You made the point that I don't know. I think it was you that made the point, but you said how what they could have done is kind of like shown. Okay, so in terms of the timeline, that was 10 years after, or was that, or was 10 years after is when he threw the mask off, or was 10 years after in the bar?
So I've not seen the Netflix Daredevil in years. I watched
Okay.
them when they came out, and I think rewatched season one once. So the original Daredevil ran from 2015 to 18, and
Hmm.
then Defenders was probably 2018. That was
But
his
was
last. That was the end of the Netflix Marvel, and then it was shelved for a while, and then the character started appearing in a couple of other things.
okay, so he didn't give up his mask. So like at the end, so I would say at the end of obviously the Netflix series, he was still Daredevil. So it's not like he gave up
Yeah.
his mask.
So he's not been actively patrolling for a while at the start of the story. I don't know how many years it's been. I don't know
Okay.
the exact like timeline for this
Mm,
character, but
mm.
he has not been doing this nonstop for 10 years.
Okay. Because I was gonna say they could have showed the effect of that because obviously when you showed me the hallway fight scene and then you obviously I've seen the bar scene in actual Daredevil, it kind of did feel like he was the same. They could have like shown there was like a difference in obviously his obviously in what he could do now because obviously that he hasn't been patrolling the streets as much as he used to before. Like it could even be visual and obviously like the his not scars, but obviously when he's getting hurt, obviously his face, like his cuts, or they could have just added something, or would have just like they could have showed something that he's not the same Daredevil. That can say the progression in the storyline. But
Yeah,
that's if I thought that was like 10 years after. So I thought that scene there was 10 years after him being Daredevil, but I don't think it was. So my point is a bit void, but still there could have been some sort of progression to show in the
yeah,
storyline to show that we're not this is not the same Daredevil. This is an actual continuation. Yeah, I'm saying this is an actual
yeah.
continuation of progression. But
I'm on the fence about it. On the one hand, it's 10 years later. On the other hand, he's not been doing this nonstop.
hmm,
Also, they needed to show that this was proper Daredevil. Like this was a continuation of what came before, which is like one of the problems they've had, that a lot of people just feel like, oh, these are not the proper versions of these characters anymore, or like we are not giving us characters that are what we like about the genre. And so this is them making a good faith effort, saying, no, actually, this is the Daredevil you like. And so at that, like, on that basis, I'm okay with moving, like, just taking it for what it is and moving on, because like you can nitpick this to death, but I view this mostly as a gesture of goodwill, which is not the worst thing they could have done.
how do you feel about the storyline? Like number one, because I felt like it's going to be different stories, which seem pretty interesting, especially with Flicks. Obviously, now he's pretty much trying to become a change man, and then you got
You keep saying
Daredevil.
Flicks, you mean Kingpin?
Is what's his name?
Wilson Fisk.
Oh, I don't know why I keep saying Flicks. My bad. His name is
It's
Wilson
Fisk.
Fisk. Okay, Fisk. Apologies. But yeah, Fisk is storyline seems like it's gonna be interesting because like he's gonna try and suppress his old self. And obviously you got Matt, right? Matt's his name.
Yeah.
You got Matt's storyline, and obviously with is obviously interesting now because obviously now he's got into deep issue with the police now. Which, by the way, there was an observation I made. One of the police officers, I think it had the Punisher tattoos. I didn't know.
I think
I
so,
might be
yeah.
wrong. Oh, so I didn't know the Punisher and Daredevil were in like the same universe.
Yeah, yeah. So season two of Daredevil was him putting the Punisher on trial.
Aren't they
Yeah.
kind of like in the same league though? Because the Punisher, obviously, he's got super like major beef with the police in a way. Well, not in a way, he does. And
So
then,
the
sorry, carry on.
Punisher is just a vigilante, right? He's basically the system will not punish the bad people, so I will. So he picks
Mm,
up a gun and then he kills the bad people. But he's not heroic about it. He doesn't try to be heroic about it, and he just takes justice into his own hand completely.
mm,
He doesn't even make any kind of pretense at trying to respect the law or work within the law or whatever. There's also something that's interesting about this version of Daredevil as well, that he's always conscious, like he's a vigilante, but he's conscious of the law, and so he's very careful just how much he breaks it. That's a separate point. So the Punisher exists in this continuity. I don't remember where he ends up at the end of season 2 of Daredevil. He does get his own show. I did not rewatch any of this before this because it's been so long. But yeah, that seemed to be a Punisher tattoo, and it seems to like that I guess implies that there are cops that view themselves as spiritual successors of the Punisher, but then they're also the ones who roughed up a seemingly innocent guy.
Yeah.
Right, we don't know who that is exactly, right? We know who he is, but we don't know if he was targeted for something or if it was a random shakedown. I don't think that's explained, if I remember correctly. But yeah, there seems to be something going on here, some kind of cult of the Punisher or something.
Oh, that's interesting. But yeah, so kind of going back to what I said. So obviously with Fisk's storyline, and then you got Matt's storyline of now obviously getting like, getting in trouble with the police, and now he's he's kind of plunged back into his duties, but in a messy way, because now he's kind of like against the police. And obviously I didn't even realize that was kind of his character, like he's kind of wary of the law. So now it kind of does play into just in the theme of justice, because it's like I'm sure there's going to be like a lot of situations where there's going to be more dilemma of breaking the law and obviously to get justice, and kind of like to get like the right type of justice, which is going to come with breaking the law, and obviously the moral dilemmas behind that. So that's going to be interesting. Obviously you got the love interest, that's obviously the therapist of Fisk. So my question pretty much is, even though all of this is happening, does the storyline feel relevant and engaging in the context of the wider MCU? And like, how well does it integrate with obviously the Netflix show? Like, does this continuation make sense?
So I don't know that this is a continuation of how Defenders ended. I think largely because it's been 6 years, and so nobody remembers. But also, it was not well received at all, right? So season 1 and I think season 1 and 2 of Daredevil were well received. Season 3 I think was mixed. Defenders was not well received, and like the Netflix Marvel series kind of went out on a low note. And so I don't think that actually actively trying to continue on from that. It's just the same, like, this is like another adventure 5 years later. So first of all, I like the story in it by itself. So this whole thing about a mobster villain who is known for his brutality and for being basically a warlord, right? Who could only be stopped by somebody like Daredevil, is seemingly a reformed man, and now he's back, and now he has a grudge against the heroes who stopped him last time, but he's wrapping it in a law and order kind of thing, and it taps a nerve. Like he really finds a following very quickly, right? Like this seems to be really something that's on people's minds, right? People seem to be concerned about crime and about vigilantes and about the system being ineffectual, and Fisk promises to get things done, right? He promises to fix things and to clean up the streets and stuff like that. And at this point, I don't think it's clear just how sincere he is. I think it's not just rhetoric. I think he actually does want to reshape New York in his image, but he's also clearly saying what people want to hear, right? My big problem with it is that it's in the MCU. So my really big thing is, why are masked vigilantes a concern after 2 alien invasions, after the snap, after the events of Eternals, right? Where it turned out all of Earth almost died because like a cosmic god hatched out of Earth and almost ate everybody. Like, why is White Tiger a problem? And like this feels like a story from 10 years ago. Right? This should be a story that's set in the early days of a superhero world, where superpowers and heroes and masked vigilantes are just appearing, and the system and the public and society is not clear on what to do about it. This is a similar problem I had with Brave New World, where the MCU seemingly has not adapted to 20 years of literal gods walking the world. Right? Like, this is happening, like the chronology with Brave New World is kind of iffy, but it came out after Brave New World, so I'm gonna assume it happens after Brave New World. So last week, the president turned into a Hulk and smashed the White House. And now you are concerned about White Tiger. Like, well, what sense does this make? Right? So I think it's a fine story, and I wish they told it 10 years ago. This is my thing.
But to play these advocate, could you argue, right, if there was a much greater, like a greater threat? Because I understand what you're saying, because there's bigger threats and there's bigger concerns. Obviously, that's currently going on, and now you're bringing back someone that's not small, but in comparison to
10 years. So you haven't seen Daredevil season 1. In season 1, that came out shortly after Avengers, right? Avengers came out 2012, I think. This came out 2015. So not immediately after. But the plot of season 1 is that Kingpin rose to power because the property damage during Thanos' invasion in the Avengers basically created this massive real estate boom where property values were in the basement. There was a lot of money to be made from buying up destroyed houses and rebuilding them and stuff like that. And that is where Kingpin made his money initially. And Hell's Kitchen, the neighborhood in which Daredevil operates, was completely changed. I don't remember exactly the exact details, but there's like a plot point where he finds a new apartment and it's much nicer than he normally would have been able to afford. And it's because property values are in the toilet because of the cleanup efforts. Because the devastation from the alien invasion is so high. So they never quite mentioned the events of the MCU, but it was clearly adjacent. It was like one house over from the MCU, right? It was clearly meant to be the same world, but it wasn't like firmly integrated in the continuity, right? And also then we fought some zombie ninjas. And now we're talking about, oh no, vigilantes exist, what do we do? Like, it feels like a step backwards, is my problem. And I wish this story had been told 10 years ago when it fit better as like one of the first stories to tell.
Yeah. But I'm saying because obviously Daredevil's character technically is so limited because he's a street level character. He's a street level superhero. So it's like, it's like the situation with Ant-Man and Kang, right? Where I think that received such a negative reaction because it was like, Kang gets beaten by someone like Ant-Man?
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying? So it's like, so where else could have the story gone? Like, what could have the threat been if Daredevil was such a, not limited character, but he's a character which it wouldn't make sense for him to fight someone like Hulk, like Red Hulk, for example. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. We would be complaining about that too, right? Because he just, like, Daredevil is just not on that power level, right? He's meant to be a street level superhero, but you can tell street level stories in a world in which superheroes exist, like, and have always existed. So my big problem here is that this is presented like a new problem when actually, like, people should have adapted to this being a fact of life for 20 years, right? And, like, New York itself has been invaded by aliens twice and all of that, right? And we are like, it does not feel like this is a world in which that has happened. So, like, one of the ways to do this is in one of the Spider-Man movies, there's like New York street gangs with alien tech, because there's like a black market for alien weapons, and that is something that's still street level, but that follows logically from what happened before, right? There have been alien invasions, and so there's proliferation of alien weapons, and it's falling into the hands of people who have no business having them, and that's causing an arms race on the streets, and that means people die, right? And maybe the police can't keep up with that, or the legal system can't keep up with that, or something, right? But that's also a story we did 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, whenever it was one of the Spider-Man movies, the one with home in the title. So I'm not exactly sure it was 4 or 5 years ago. But again, this feels like a step back, right? Like the story should be something like, I don't know, like there's a comic series called Gotham Central, which is a police procedural in Gotham City, but not from the point of view of Batman, but from the point of view of regular cops. And there's like stories in there, like there's like two gods fighting and people are dying, and what are we gonna do? Or like one of the first stories is that they follow up on a lead, and they stumble on Mr. Freeze, and one of the two cops gets killed by the ice ray, and the rest of the story is the surviving cop trying to deal with his survivor's guilt and PTSD, because in a world where supervillains exist, what's a regular beat cop supposed to do? right? And you can just walk around the wrong corner and you just die. Or worse, you watch somebody you care about die and then you have to deal with it. And but no matter how much you go over it in your head, there was nothing you could have done, right, to do anything different. You are simply completely outmatched compared to like a mad scientist with his freeze gun. You know what I mean? Like that's the kinds of stories, like street level stories, that you can tell in a world in which superheroes are normal, right? And the MCU is not quite at that point, but that's kind of my point, that we don't know what the MCU is like, and a show like this would be a good opportunity to show this, right? Because we have more screen time, right? We have 9 episodes, I think it is. We can show a lot of daily life in New York, and we can use that for world building and for exploring what the ramifications of powers existing are and supervillains and superheroes existing are, more than the movies could, right? Because there's more time. And like this feels like a missed opportunity insofar as would that really be the concern? Would vigilantes existing be a concern? Like, or shouldn't it be about the police feels outmatched by superpowers and there's a sense that the police is a joke and obsolete, and as a result, like, crime is rampant, something like that. And then Kingpin says, look, I was on the wrong side of the law and I've redeemed myself, but I know what it's like when you face off against somebody with superpowers, and what it feels like to be like a regular guy who's just outmatched by somebody, yeah, who has like sonar, right? Like and you know, stuff like this. And just years ago, like, zombie ninjas rampaged on our streets and the police were powerless or something. I'm not sure like how common knowledge that was. It's been a while since I watched it, but my point is just you could tell much more interesting, or much more, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with this story exactly, like, by itself. It's more like it does not fit into the MCU as it should be in 2025.
It does kind of feel like it feels like nothing's. It feels like nothing's happened. It feels like their own, like, their city never went through what obviously.
But it's New York. Like, this is the Marvel universe. Everything happens in New York, right? This, like, if this was set like in Chicago or something, we could say, okay, they've been watching weird stuff going on in New York for 20 years, but it's not really become a reality for them until now, right? That would be something else. But it's New York, right? This you know, it's not like there's people in costumes flying around like every minute of every day, but this is like a thing that happens. Like, this is like in Brave New World, we complained about how the Secret Service does not have a protocol for what to do if the White House gets attacked by supervillains, right? They just take out their handguns and shoot, and then are surprised when it doesn't work. But after 20 years, they should have tactics for this. Similarly, the world should have adapted in some way, one way or another, to superheroes and villains existing at this point. Anyway, I think we've belabored this point, but I think that is just like the big anvil that's hanging around this show's neck, is that it's like the MCU throughout Phase 4 has really failed to paint a coherent picture of what the world is like. Like, in my view, the MCU doesn't exist, right? Like, it's kind of, it exists on the level of a couple of characters that cross over sometimes, but there isn't a world, right, that these characters inhabit. It's not clear what exists in this world and what doesn't, and what people know and believe and how they act and why. Like, all of that has been completely neglected. And then this show comes along and just pretends none of that has happened. I don't know, like, and it would be better off if it was just off in its own corner and did not make a reference. But then we mentioned Spider-Man, right? When Kingpin gives a speech about the impact that vigilantes have had on New York, he mentioned Spider-Man, right? So you can't have it both ways. Either you are off in your own little corner and you can do what you want, or you're part of the whole, in which case you kind of have to play ball with everybody else. Like, you can't just do your own thing. Like, none of this is really a problem with the story itself, right? I actually like the story itself. And this seems to be more intelligent than just about anything the MCU has put out, I don't know, since Winter Soldier or something. Just in terms of the politics of it and whatever. But it does not feel like it fits in with anything else. And not based on little details of continuity or whatever, but just the big picture. Like, this is what it should be. This is what the world should be like at this point.
They should have kind of did what DC did with the Penguin.
Yeah. Like that's clearly in the same world
Mm.
as the Batman,
And
but
even
it's
though you
not.
don't even see the Batman, you can still see his pretty much impact
Yeah,
on, you know what I'm saying, on Gotham. And you're right, that's what's missing. Like they could even in Daredevil, they could even like did something small like show infrastructure that's been affected by obviously what's been going on in the universe. You know what I'm saying? It could be something small like that. But it does
it's
seem sorry.
it's little things in the attitude and in the dialogue.
Mm,
Right? Like the first season of Daredevil made a point that people are a little bit shell shocked from the invasion of Thanos.
mm,
And people have moved on, and life goes on, and all of that, but it lingers in people's minds. And here, nobody mentioned. Like maybe the blip will get mentioned, but look, an alien warlord killed half of you a couple of years ago. Like, should this not? Like people are not going to mention it every minute of every day, right? But shouldn't this have informed how society works? Like in the Spider-Man movie, one of the recent Spider-Man movies, there's this whole thing about a world had adapted to half of people being gone, and like people had moved into the empty houses, and jobs had been filled, and so on. And so the people who came back afterwards had nowhere to return to, and they caused all sorts of social problems. Where are those social problems? Like the world does not feel like that has been happening, unless in like 2 years everything has been resolved cleanly, right? And again, there's like 7 more episodes to come, but I don't know. Like if you're already on a goodwill mission, shouldn't you put in something in the first 2 episodes to show that yes, we are aware of this, and yes, we have a plan. Trust us. Because at this point, I don't believe they. I think they kind of just created a story that may or may not be good. We don't know yet. But the main thing of it is, I'm not seeing much in the way of goodwill gestures to show that this fits in with anything else.
I think they're focusing more on the issues that's currently going on in real life, rather than not even rather. What they should have done is, yeah, still kind of cover the the political and social issues that's going on in real life, but at the same time cover the issues like the issue that's currently going on in the fantasy world, the Marvel world as well. Because what I think they're doing is because they have covered. I think what they're going to cover is police brutality, like I mentioned, and justice. You know what I'm saying? And obviously,
Luke Cage was 8 years ago, and there was about a bulletproof black man who becomes a symbol of hope.
yeah,
That was 8 years ago,
mm,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, and I think that's why they're making a mistake. I think hopefully they don't. I don't know where the story's gonna go. That's gonna be my next question. I don't know where the story's gonna go. This might sound a bit crazy, but I think they need to. Hopefully, it becomes less real, as in realism, and they move it. Still, they kind of go back to not even go back to, but they cover the fantasy stuff because this is still a fictional character. Do you get what I'm saying? I get it's cool. Like obviously cover like real life issues, but just remember
And like
who is covering the real life issues.
to cut to the chase, Kingpin is not Trump.
Yeah,
Like they're just not the same. Like the only thing they have in common is that they are business people who went into politics as an outsider and kind of just wrote like a way for populism. And after that, there's no similarity. Like in terms of temperament, in terms of goals, in terms of policies, in terms of outlook, personality, it's like couldn't be more different. So it can't be that. I'm kind of glad it's not that because everybody's been doing that. But like the comparison is obvious, and I just don't think that's where they're going. And I think it's been in production for too long. Like this is not a reaction to Trump being reelected. It can't be. I don't think there's been enough time for that. And I'm kind of glad about that. Just have it be its own thing, and then we can talk about these ideas in a more universal way, like Kingpin not having any political connections. Like he does not in fact know how politics works. Like if they're smart about it, that will be a problem. Where like in this episode we see him kind of making a big show about like there's this pothole and there's red tape and everybody's applauding him for getting it done and so on. But I kind of expect that in episode 3 or 4 there will be a repercussion to that. Like maybe there was a good reason why you needed a permit to fill in that pothole. Maybe something got damaged. Maybe it wasn't done properly, like something. And then there's a price to pay for Kingpin. And it turns out that you cannot simply just decide it, right? That would be kind of interesting. I hope they go towards stuff like this, where they kind of show that, like they already beginning to show this, right? Where he's beginning to see that New York politics is a little, like there's a lot of people to please and a lot of interests to balance, and like he basically has no supporters, right? He has a bunch of grassroots support, but he has no allies in the system, right? Like the police commissioner outright declares war on him, and he immediately falls back on heavy-handed blackmail to get rid of him and make him fall in line. But he can't do that with everybody, right? And if he does it with everybody, sooner or later, he's out of ammunition, right? And one thing I want them to do is be a little bit intelligent and nuanced in terms of just how far Kingpin can get, because the system will fight him because he's not part of the system. And I'm wondering if how far this goes, if it's just about corruption, or if there's actually a reason for why you kind of need alliances and partners and a coalition in order to get anything done in politics. You can't just give a big speech and then everybody falls in line, and you also can't just bully everybody. Like that works sometimes, but politics is about making alliances, right? And building majorities, right? And that also means making it worth people's whiles to support you. They get something, you get something, that kind of thing, right? The kind of deal making that goes into politics. And Kingpin does not have the temperament for that. I think Kingpin is actually a really bad politician because he is not. He's a bully, right? He's a tyrant. He just forces his way to the top and just leaves a trail of bodies where he goes. But that's not politics. Politics is like recognizing who you need and knowing what you need to give people to bring them on your side until you have enough for a majority, and then you get what you want. And somebody like Kingpin should be really bad at this, right? He should be. Like we're seeing the first parts of this, right? And I wonder if that was like a token effort, like the thing with the police commissioner, or if there will be more like this, right? Where nobody wants to be on his side because he gets a reputation for how he treats people he doesn't like, right? So it's too dangerous to try to make deals with Kingpin, and as a result, he doesn't get anything done. He gets it done like in the spur of the moment, like fill in this pothole. And if somebody doesn't like it, send them to me, right? That is something that works once, but you can't run a city like this. And I wonder how smart they will be about this. Where, because this also parallels the vigilante thing, right? Because the vigilantes exist outside the law because the law is inadequate. But now Kingpin is the system, or he's part of the system, but he still acts like he's outside the system. Right, he doesn't need anybody, and anybody who is in his way is just an enemy to be bulldozed. But he's not a negotiator, right? He's never made alliances. I think that is something that I would want them to do. And we'll see if they do it. So far, it looks a little bit like they will. But we'll see.
I feel like with Kingpin's character, because I don't know if he was like a liar, for example. Was he like a liar in Daredevil?
I don't think so. I think he's always been very straightforward. Like, he will tell you what he wants, and if you don't give it to him, you get a sledgehammer to the face.
Okay, well, that's so I think it's either going to go two ways then. Either it's going to be a thing where he kind of is going to be similar, similar to the Penguin in the sense where he's going to be someone that has ulterior motives. Like, even though he's presenting himself as the mayor, in reality, everything that he does is going to be it's pretty much it's for a greater purpose. Well, not greater purpose, but there's an ulterior motive for his main goal, which is obviously going to be something which is evil.
I kind of believe that he views New York as his, and so he wants it to be the way he wants it to be. And he tried to do that as the Kingpin, and now he's trying it as the mayor. I kind of believed him that he's sincere in that, but we'll see what happens when he kind of stumbles for the first time, right? Like, will he actually adapt to the requirements of that job?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or it's going to be a thing where we're going to see like an internal battle where he's generally like trying to change. However, when things go against his way, his old self is going to kind of like creep in, and there's going to be like that internal battle of, am I going to go back to my old ways, or is my old ways going to come out to the point where it just fully takes over? Or is there a thing where I'm going to try and beat them, but the legal way, and obviously, like you said, make New York the way that I want New York to actually be, but do it legally. Obviously, because you can kind of see it. You can that is kind of reinforced with that. Obviously, the scene where he's going to therapy with his wife. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, so it seems like he's trying to go the right route. However, we don't know if that's genuine and it's a thing where it's going to be an internal battle, or if it's a thing where it's just an act and there's an ulterior motive to what he's doing.
I think it's genuine for now, but he will run out of patience very quickly. And then
Mm,
we'll see what I think he will relapse when he runs out of patience and he's still not getting his way.
mm.
And then he will fall back on his tried methods. But now it's not in the shadows. Now it's it's in broad daylight, and then we'll see what happens.
What was your favorite moment or scene in the first two episodes that we've seen?
Matt and Kingpin staring each other down in the diner. And like where they Fisk, I think, comes from a speech or a rally or something, and Matt kind of confronts him like on the way out and says, "Let's talk." And so they sit down in a diner and they kind of size each other up and kind of try to figure out each other's intentions. And one thing I really liked about this is that they were not acting like civilized people, they were acting like warlords. Like they were acting like people who are outside the law. It's purely the rule of the strongest, and they were trying to figure out if the other one was going to be a problem and had to be dealt with. Like even Daredevil came across as really creepy in this because his state of mind was, if Fisk is a problem, I'm gonna have to deal with him, but on my own way, on my own terms, outside the law, and so on. And while I think that scene went on for a little bit too long and it was a little bit overwritten and overdramatic and whatever, but it really sold to this idea that in a story about the law and the system and being outside the system or in the system, both of these are beyond any any constraints of civilization. Right? With them, it's purely about power, and that is a tightrope that Daredevil has to walk, right? Because he's a vigilante lawyer, right? Who's always about trying to work within the system as much as he can. And even when he works outside of the system, he tries to kind of does the minimum needed outside the system and then guide things back. Like ultimately he wants the bad guy to end up in court, right? But sometimes the system needs to be nudged a little bit. And that's kind of like this ideological and moral tightrope that Daredevil as a character has always walked, and that is on display in this episode too. But in that scene, none of that mattered. None of this was about will I see you in court? It's like, will I beat you to a pulp in the streets someday because you are causing trouble again? And that is an interesting place, and I kind of hope that that was intentional. But that's what I took away from that scene, because like that really ties into all of these themes of law and accountability and being a new person and having changed and being better and all of that. All of those ideas that kind of are floating around in these two episodes. That though, but that scene kind of stood apart a little bit because that one was purely about power.
I feel like that scene would have done more for me if obviously I knew the history. If obviously not even knew the history, but if I saw the history.
I think the only thing you need to know is that they fought each other in the past. And
I
that Kingpin
understand, but
used to be a mobster, and now he's claiming to be legit.
yeah, I understand, but because when I first watched it, I thought, okay, this is like it's a bit too long. And I obviously I understand that it was supposed to be like, a highlight moment because that okay, two sworn enemies meeting again, but in different circumstances, in weird circumstances to be honest. And there was a lot that was telling in that scene. That's like that scene there told me that okay, this Fisk guy, I don't think he's genuine. I think he has ulterior motives here because it's like he still has grudges, like which is pretty clear. He still has grudges against superheroes or vigilantes, and he's still out to get Daredevil, even though he implies that he's not gonna like he not even implied. He says that he's changed. However, there was a scene where he says there's pretty much no like if you're caught in the act of vigilantism or something like that, then I'm gonna get you. So that to me kind of shows that okay, either there's an ulterior motive and he wants to still beat him, but just legally, or it's a thing where that was just his old self seeping in again. You know what I'm saying? And that was kind of like not a slip up, but a trigger like that, a situation like that, put him in a scenario like an environment like that. That's when it will either make or break him in terms of his journey to transformation. So that it was impactful for me in that sense. However, I wanted it to be even more impactful because of how long their interaction was, and I thought it would have been if I watched Daredevil, and I think some viewers who haven't seen Daredevil might feel the same way when watching it.
It is a bit tricky that it's a sequel to a 10-year-old show.
Mm.
Right? Like, there's a lot of, I think, just bound to be a bunch of people who were not into this 10 years ago. And even if you were, you probably forgot and probably have to rewatch it. I would recommend rewatching it because it's really good. At least the first two seasons. Also, season 1 of Jessica Jones is also worth watching. Half of Luke Cage. That's kind of it. The rest is kind of not that great. It kind of didn't stick the landing at all. Iron Fist specifically, don't go near that. But yeah, I think just to get I think this requires you to have seen at least some of the of season 1, so you have an idea of who these characters are. I do think it suffers from coming in completely fresh. It is framed as a reunion very much and as a continuation, and I don't think it stands on its own. I think you have to have seen the old series.
I think we should go to last thoughts then. Daniel, you're always good at closing last thoughts, so I'll go first in terms of what I think.
Go for it.
I think based on what I've seen, the first 2 episodes, I'm definitely gonna continue. Well, we are gonna continue watching it. But if we had a choice not to watch it, I would still watch it. Is what I'm trying to say. Look, it's even though the first two haven't completely sold me, I am still intrigued as to what's going to happen because of the storyline and obviously the new characters and the messiness. I love messiness and I love drama, and I do find the whole legal drama and superhero drama to be it's very messy and it's just a good watch. It's a good watch. And the fight, it's just the start I'm gonna have to start getting used to. And I think the corridor scene that Daniel you showed me was much better than the fighting scenes I've seen so far. So hopefully it does match or is better than what I saw in that scene, and especially the scene with Fisk where he's smashing the guy's face in. I'm hoping we see more of that, not from Fisk per se, but like from any just just in the series. So I'm hoping that I do get to see kind of like the gritty and bloodiness, because there was an article that I don't know, one of the makers of this of Born Again said that this was going to be even more bloodier or grittier or something along the lines.
That's marketing. Just ignore
Yeah.
what they say. Just see what it is.
True. But yeah, so I do. So I'm the storyline is what's keeping me, keeping my interest so far. And yeah, the style is just something I'm gonna have to kind of like get used to, and hopefully I do get used to it. But yeah, all in all, I'd say I had an all right experience so far. I can't really give it a rating because we haven't finished it, but I'd say all right experience, and I'm intrigued to see more.
Yeah, so I used to really like the MCU. And like a lot of people, I've not been impressed with what they've put out in the last 5 years. And I've been giving them a bunch of second chances. Most recently with Brave New World, which was underwhelming. So far, this is the best attempt they've made. And it was the first one where I didn't feel taken for a ride in terms of movies or shows where they promised this one is different. This is back to the old form. Like, this is the part where I think they're actually capable of it. I like this version of Daredevil. I hope they address the things that I've been talking about. Like, they have 7 more episodes, and if a couple of them deal with the kinds of things we've been talking about, I'm okay with that. It's not perfect. It's not exactly what it should be in terms of from a world building standpoint. But as a drama, I think it's back to form, at least so far. It's worth pointing out that often the quality is front-loaded in these things. And I would not be surprised if from episode 3 onwards it just drops off like a cliff, because that's happened before. I hope it doesn't. I hope this is a worthwhile watch, and I hope this is the beginning of the MCU coming back to form. And most importantly, I want there to be a corner in the MCU that's for adults, right? Doesn't just have to be gritty. Doesn't just have to be violent, but it would be nice if there was a corner of the MCU that was not for all ages. That like, I think the MCU is big enough, and the Disney Plus output or the Disney output is high enough that there can be something for everybody, as opposed to everything being for everybody, and as a result everything is the same. I like that there was a minimum of humor in this. There was little to no Marvel humor in this. Nobody was winking at the camera. This is just a serious drama, and I hope it stays that way. And I hope this is kind of the beginning of a corner of the MCU that's a little bit more serious than the mainstream output. And I still go to the next Avengers movie and all of that, right? But I want there to be a more serious, more adult corner of the MCU where we can tell some stories that an Avengers movie is not going to touch. And I think that would only make the MCU healthier and increase its longevity and its appeal. And I hope this is the beginning of that, because I've tried before with other shows that did not quite get there. But this is a good start. That's how I would describe it.
Hi guys, thank you very much for tuning in today's discussion. I hope you enjoyed what you heard today. If you did enjoy, please leave a comment on what you thought. Leave a comment what you thought about Daredevil episode 1 and 2. Even leave a comment on what you think your prediction for what's going to come. And yeah, Daniel, please let the people know what the hell they can do.
So if you liked this video, please tell a friend. And if you hated this video, tell an enemy.
You heard it here first, guys. Eye of the Storm podcast. But guys, we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.